Welcome to the Point of View Show. My name's Andrew Tran. I'm your host. This show highlights business professionals in Asia and around the world to get an understanding on what makes them effective, how they do it, and advice to help you grow in leadership, branding, marketing, and sales. For more information, head over to my website, www.andrewtran.asia. Before we get into it, smash that subscribe button and click notifications whether or not you're listening or watching this. It helps me a ton and it helps other like-minded people find these episodes a lot easier. Now let's get on with the show. Michael, how's things going?
Good, mate. How are you?
It's
great to be here.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming. And for anyone who's watching or listening, Michael, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
I run a brand and marketing agency predominantly for law firms and professional services firms from Australia, but we've got clients around the world, which is very cool. We're very much brand strategy focused and content focused. So that is a lot of fun. I was a lawyer in a previous life, and I also ran an international legal recruitment consultancy for 13 years. So essentially, I advise some of the biggest law firms in the world on their employer brand strategy. And then I've started to make a lot of content in my own business and just loved it. So spun out an agency about 2.5 years ago, and here we are, mate.
Nice. Like with everything, I want to touch on Beyond Billables and what you do and stuff a little bit later, but just something for a little bit of fun. If the international gates were open today, where would you fly to?
Yeah, if it was open today, I would fly straight into Vienna and take my kids to see their grandparents and great grandmother in Slovakia, because we've been stuck away from family, mate.
I guess we all are, man. And for me, it'll be like coming back home to Australia and catching up with my family and friends as well. And, getting on the mats with you, Mr. Brown Belt.
I know. It's been bloody too many years. And especially the last 18 months, it's felt weird from a training perspective, of very stop and start. But yes, brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, coming up to 10 years on the mat, almost full time. So yeah, that's my definitely passion outside of work.
Yeah. Do you think some of the principles you've learned in martial arts has kind of translated in the way you approach things as a strategist in the marketing space?
Yeah, no, 100%. In lots of different ways. In the general way, I approach business as a bit of a journey, and the need to continuously learn and continuously get better, and my enjoyment of that's certainly in there. I also I approach content and from the perspective of a practitioner as well, in that it's not about being perfect. A lot of it is about working out what works as you go, and you don't really know until you do it. And I like to do that anyway, so that I can show clients what works and not just speak about it in a generic sense, saying you do this because that works, but actually say you can do this and because I've done this, and that's why I know it's going to work for you. And I think from a martial arts perspective, there's certainly a teaching element as well, and I enjoy that in the business, because I tend to think if I've learned something, I want to teach someone else so that they can have that experience. And I think about that in jiu-jitsu. That's why people line up, but it's your responsibility to help teach everyone to your left, and somewhat in my business as well. And that's why I started Beyond Billables, because I learned the power of brand and content and that element. And I thought, well, I'd love to empower, other small and growing legal services and professional services businesses with that same insight that I was able to learn the hard way.
Yeah, actually, you just answered my first question, which was like, how did Beyond Billables start? Obviously, like you mentioned before, you have a early background in law. And then you decided to kind of transition. You love creating things, like we were kind of talking about a pre-call as well, and it kind of translated. And now with with your martial arts background, it kind of has that flow effect in terms of what you do, right?
Yeah, man. And I guess it was a natural progression. So I was running this recruitment business, and I was a bit burnt out, or I was very burnt out. And the business was changing, and we were headhunters. And so we'd just be smashing the phones all day for years. And I had enough of it. And then I thought, well, this content thing is interesting. And I actually had a meeting with two candidates who I just placed in London. And I asked them, why did you use our business? And they told me the answer actually didn't make me happy. It was a personal answer, and it was like, because it was doing business with you. And I thought, okay, that's cool. But actually from a brand perspective, if I want to build a brand around this business, we failed with the brand message. We'd run every campaign for every international firm. And I thought, well, that should have been something that came up in that discussion over lunch, but it just wasn't. And after that, I realized, okay, we've got to do a better job if I'm going to build a business. On the back of that, I started a podcast called the Beyond Billables podcast. And then I just loved making things, and I loved the strategy aspect. So I left the recruitment business behind and just was offering strategy and content creation services. And that essentially became the agency.
Yeah, nice. That's so cool. That's a nice kind of really nice linear progression, and then kind of coming back to full circle to what you want to do. Like you go back to what you want to do, your hobby per se, and then like look towards kind of building that out in terms of your career. So that's really, really cool. So first question, I really am interested in this. Obviously, everyone who's watching and listening, COVID's really, really affecting their territory, their city, their country, especially there in Brisbane and also here in Ho Chi Minh City. So my question is like, as COVID is kind of running through the city and governments are trying to figure things out, how are you seeing your clients in the marketing space use your services?
Yeah, it's interesting. Last year, people put a stop to a lot of their marketing spend because in legal services are very reactive. And so one of the fastest ways to cut costs is to stop doing marketing. And so they did that across the board. And that was made, things difficult from our perspective. What I've really seen, especially in the last 6 months, is that once people realized their business would survive, that they could afford to invest in other marketing, the more, the long-term view clients have taken the opportunity to really nail down their brand positioning, really nail down the assets that they need, and start to roll that messaging out because they can do it from a position of strength. And they've been quite had good foresight in that. In legal services, it's been incredibly busy across the board for a lot of law firms. They have done better than ever. I mean, some consumer-facing firms haven't, but a lot of others have. So funnily enough, they ended up getting very busy. So they held off doing some projects. But yeah, I've seen people realize the importance of their brand and recognize, though, that, if they're going to they need to plan for the long term. And those kind of clients have been coming back to us and saying, okay, what does 2022 look like now? Or, let's get the basics right so we can, really keep building on that. I think everyone internally, bigger firms internally, the marketing managers have had issues with budget. And so they've been constrained. I think that's definitely turning around now with a lot of these businesses. It still hasn't turned around enough, but it will continue to into 2022. And I think demand will keep building, and they'll recognize that they need to keep investing more. And we saw that turnaround earlier this year.
And I like how you said at the beginning, like brands are using the time initially to plan. So to try and survive and plan ahead as far as they can. And then obviously one of the first things that happen is marketing budgets get cut. But as they realize is that, oh, wait a minute, if we cut our marketing, then we essentially cut our positioning in terms of like how we can actually either retain customers or even attract new customers. Because that's the whole point of marketing, right? You spend $1, you're hoping to get at least $3 back, right? And so they're saying, oh,
Yeah.
wait, if we cut marketing completely, we're going to see like nothing coming back. So there's that kind of balance, right? Is that kind of what you were seeing as well, like especially in the early stages of when businesses were in full lockdown?
Oh yeah, for sure. Look, in professional services, there is no balance generally. It's generally reactionary, short-term decision making to protect profits of the principal, and across the board for any expenses. And the most effective way to do that in the short term is to cut back expenses. The problem is, once they realize that there's a real medium-term cost to that, then they'll come back to it. What I've seen though is the really progressive firms and the ones that have this is why the strategy is so important, to have a multi-year view. They recognize that more people were online, there were more eyeballs, and especially with a lot of platforms where you could still get really good organic results. A handful of good firms, really sort of value in that. Not many though, mate. In the grand scheme of things, I see, we're still a long way from where we will be. And, somewhat, the social media marketing aspects, I think of it in terms of with a website, right? So 15 years ago or 20 years ago, there were websites, but a lot of businesses didn't invest much in them. Now everyone knows that it's a really critical point for your business to have a really good website. So they invest in that. Social media is really still 5 to 10 years even in professional services away from them recognizing the opportunity and value there. Some do, but it's a really small percentage of the population. And I was just having a chat with a podcast guest, James from Coffee and a Case Note, and he's done amazingly well on social media. And I didn't ask him, but the truth is, like, there's no one out there copying what he does. And I find that amazing given the results. And even still, we're a long way from a lot of businesses recognizing that value. And it's just coming kind of slowly in the conservative businesses that I work with.
And you touched on like professional services, right? And so as an agency, like working in or servicing clients within the professional services space, when it comes to B2B, I think you alluded it before, where it's like a little bit of reactionary, but is there any kind of clear differences between some of the professional services in terms of marketing strategy, where you compare that against maybe other B2B services?
Yeah, I think, I look at the gaps, and I think the gap with professional services still is really understanding how complementary all the different aspects of their brand are to other aspects of their business. So they still silo things. They see marketing as over here as being this just lead generation. And then there's business development. And then there's, client experience and CX. And then there's X. And I think with professional services, we're still some ways away from people being able to join the dots and understand how complementary they all are to each other, because they still talk about these things as being separate, but they're not. Like if you're, if personal one-to-one business development is important to you, then shouldn't you have a great online presence and be building value, because that gets you more opportunity to sit down in that situation, or it builds trust before you sit down in that situation. And I think professional services struggle to see those connections because organizationally they still create silos organizationally with budget and funding within teams who then have specific goals set. And organizationally, there's not a lot of overlap between those things. So there's, it's a classic, the employment teams over here, and they have a budget for, for employer branding or attraction and retention. And then the marketing and BD teams over here, and they have their own budget, and they don't want to spend any money on, employer brand. They just want to spend money on attracting new clients. And so all of a sudden there's this kind of fake divide within an organization. And so I think professional services have a lot to learn with that, because I know a lot of product businesses and consumer businesses that are much more aligned in that internally. And that's going to be our job in the next, decade, to demonstrate that if you do this really well over here, it's got a really positive net effect over here. And I think we're a long way from people really understanding that, and organizations making good decisions on that basis.
Yeah, it's the siloing that really kind of hampers, I guess, business growth or business trajectory in terms of like their maturity to scale and grow more. It's something, actually, when you were explaining all that, it reminded me of a previous guest that I had, where he was talking about the divisional silos that teams have, and the way to overcome it is through an omni-channel type of approach, or a more integrated type of approach, especially when we look at campaigns that are coming in, and how we kind of attack that from a retention point of view, from an acquisition point of view, because it's not all about like, acquiring new customers. You also need to look after your existing customers as well, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be loyal to you. They're going to be the ones that will refer you to others as well. And so having that intertwine, I think, is really interesting, especially like in the legal space, where I see it's like, oh, is it like the old boys type of approach where people get businesses through personal contacts versus where, like, as opposed to, contacts through online kind of spaces and stuff. So,
well, look, it matters for all businesses. I just think about mine, and I try to create, a pod-like approach when we've got a project, and I want to bring in the variety of skills in my team. And the more I divide things up and saying that's just your job and that's just your job, whenever that happens, the outcome of work is inferior. Where when I empower the team to work across each other, I've got a great, my great designer plus my videographer who's got a different artistic eye to things, and my strategic eye, that power is way more than me just giving individual tasks out. When we're able to, to work on the same level. And the issue professional services firms have is that the role of ego and the role of not just ego, but the structural reality of these businesses, where it's hard for them to sit down and take what that other person has to say as being on the same level as them, especially with legal practices or accounting practices, because they're not the fee earner. So they aren't seen as valued as much. But if we can come in and create a sense that, that person's opinion is hugely valuable, then, you can get that shared skill across the business. And I think, especially in the marketing space, that's where the non-practitioner can add way more value. So I try to do that ourselves, because I recognize that I can find myself in that position too.
Do you find that with professional services, do you find like when people go towards, like, why did they go to one legal firm versus another firm? If we take away like, oh, because I like that particular lawyer and I like how that particular lawyer dealt with XYZ case, which is potentially related to my case, do you find that the legacy of that particular firm, so it's like, I don't know which one, like two like largest firms in Australia, for instance, like, do you think the legacy of the heritage of that really plays a part?
Yeah, it does. I mean, that's brand. Yeah. So no, certainly relationships play a part, long-term relationships. I think that's potentially decreasing, especially as new players come in and there's more opportunity to test other services and other providers that are more discreet, boutique providers. So I think it's decreasing, but it's always going to be useful. And that's the classic power of brand. It's also, client knowledge is kept in that other relationship as well. So that firm has a strong knowledge of that business. And so they're in a position where they can probably provide a better service if they deeply understand that business. But it's getting disrupted certainly by other players now. And because a lot of procurement decision makers are quite progressive and looking forward, and they've got different like motivators for how they procure work, that's starting to change in professional services. And it's kind of like with creative services, right? Like back in the day, a big business might have just gone to a large agency who would just do everything for them. Now, less so. You be like, no, I want the best, videographer over there. I want the best strategy person over there. And then bringing that all together from, that tends to happen a lot more now, even with big businesses in brand and creative.
Yeah, nice. That's really, really interesting. The way you just kind of compared, say, legal services, how one would pick one particular legal services to, I guess, creative services now, like where you're not necessarily looking for like an Ogilvy or like a Leo Burnett, but you're looking for like these small boutiques that have a speciality in one area that will get the most of it. I think that's really, really cool. And also, I think what was really interesting in what you said before was like the disruptors, these small firms that are coming up that are disrupting the space, that are specializing in certain, legalities, say like crypto, or blockchain or any other kind of fintech element. Then you got ones that are like really kind of honed in around, I don't know, sports management or something like that. So I think that is really, really cool, man.
It's the same with our business, mate. Like, honestly, the fact is that if you've got a specialization, it's a lot easier for people to make a decision on your services because you're openly differentiated from the competition. So if you're a law firm, like, why wouldn't you use my services over a generalist? Because I deeply understand your business, was a lawyer, X, Y, and Z, right? And it goes for anyone who is able to find a positioning around something that's important to that buyer that does, and then, I mean, that's the greatest argument for positioning, right? Like being chosen based on your positioning. But it's the same in creative services, professional services. It's very, very similar.
So Michael, just before we kind of lead into the last question, I'm really, really interested in this, like, because you work in the professional services space and you love creating content, you've been creating content for years now. What are some of the cool things that you've seen in terms of content creation in this space?
Yeah, look, I think certainly video and it is really great for firms of all sizes. I'm seeing some better produced video. I think, like, if I was a firm, I'd be looking at what other people do more broadly and not just doing simple direct to camera things, but looking at how you can produce other content in ways that are more digestible. I've certainly, for a lot of carousel and document style posts, infographics, things like that on LinkedIn and across Instagram and Facebook and elsewhere. I think that there's so much scope for doing more of that and making video off the back of, say, blog content or presentations that, especially professional services they write a lot, but it's not very accessible content, 1,500 word blog on something, but you create a cool document post or an infographic and it's way more accessible. So I've, firms who are doing that and moving away from just purely sales driven content, really focusing down on value and really focusing down on, it's not about telling the market how good you are. No one really cares that how to draft X, Y, and Z contract the best, because but what they care about is their problems and how you're the best person to solve their problems and how you go about that, and that's what they really, really care about. And some firms are starting to really improve with that. They care about stories. They care about putting themselves in. So yeah, that I've started to see that change, but there's still a lot of volume garbage content out there, mate. That's like, it seems to be box ticking exercise, and we've got to put content out, so we'll just punch this out. But you know, I definitely, clients of ours love the variety now, and you know, I love the fact that you can use different forms of media.
Yeah, and do you find that with content, like, do you still see it's all mostly dominated by like this clean cut, polished type of video edit cut, or are you also seeing the emergence of more, intimate, humanized type of stories where they're just direct in front of the camera and showing
For
their
sure.
humanity? Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And obviously short video. I mean, short video is everything. Whether it's Reels, TikTok, or, shorts on YouTube. And that short form video, that is just so powerful. And when businesses really recognize the power of that, maybe it'll be, well, look, some businesses do already. But for instance, our little agency, I had a reel with 10.3 million views and 400,000 likes. And interestingly, I think it was 7 or 8 million of them were in the 35 to 50-year-old age demographic on TikTok, on Reels, right?
What was it?
It was actually just this, it was this reel where I was doing, I had actually, Zlatan Ibrahimovic speaking, and it was talking about setting up our office space, and he was talking about going to IKEA and how he was getting his furniture made in IKEA, and it was a funny clip from a really well-known sports person, and I just used that and had a good laugh about it, because I was literally putting my office together myself, mate. So but that was a really good sign for me that if you're a consumer facing business, maybe that was our 50th reel, and where this so if you're a consumer facing business, that was 10.3 million organic, 400,000 like engagements. If you're not doing that and you sell to, like, what are you doing? That was like such the evidence to me right there where the audience is for organic. Anyway, I digress, but short video, hugely powerful.
Wow, that's cool. You're inspiring me to get on the reel game, because I've done bits of reels like on Instagram. I've yet to kind of go on TikTok. I focus a lot of my time and energy mostly on LinkedIn and just building my connections through that, because that's where most of my clients are mostly at and where they see things and stuff. And I like how you mentioned before, earlier, that those carousels. So taking a pretty dry document and finding a really creative way to tell the story of it in 6 to maybe 10 slides in this carousel, which is really cool. And pro tip, anyone who's watching, listening, experiment with your LinkedIn carousels, because you will get engagement like going gangbusters on that. I don't know why, but is that something you're seeing as well?
Yeah, man. Yeah. Carousels perform great. And also, like, if you make it for that, it's something you can send a client.
Yeah.
It's a PDF, right? So if you like to email things out, you've got something that you can email out. And thinking about your content is, it's not just LinkedIn, it's not just this platform, but it's maybe you make it for one and you can send it somewhere else. And I regularly put them on our website now, on our blog as well. But yeah, nice. That carousel style, document style, huge engagement. And especially for now on LinkedIn, will in 18 months time, and engagement's decreasing, it'll be pay to play on LinkedIn at some point. So if you're not making the most of it, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. I think as LinkedIn matures, like you'll see the signs of pay to play come into effect a lot more overtly on LinkedIn as soon as they increase or improve their marketing capabilities, like their media, like capabilities, similar to the space of like Twitter or Facebook, where it's very like they make it super easy for small firms or small businesses to actually advertise on that platform. As soon as they make that, yeah, it's going to be pay to play. So yeah, anyone who's watching, listening, you're on LinkedIn, like maximize as much as you can, experiment as much as you can, like try different formats as well, and you'll find the one that suits you the most. And as soon as like organic reach decreases organically on LinkedIn, you're gonna find like, oh, all the hard work that you've done in the past is gonna pay dividends later down the track. So
100%, and mix it up, like you said. Like I just put a text message out on LinkedIn the other day, and I don't do them often because I usually hate the long spiels, but I did like a relatively short one, and it had 6,000 organic and 100 or something engagements in a day, which now is really great. I mean, those numbers used to be easier to hit, but now I was just like, what? So that was because I think I've been mixing things up across different media types and different content types.
Yep. Nice. And look, like I know you're pressed for time, so I have one last question. It is a question that I ask all my guests. It is advice time. So, Michael, if you had to talk to C-suite around marketing, but in particular around retention, what kind of advice would you give them?
Employee retention?
It could be client retention or employee retention.
Oh, well, okay. I would say take advantage of the opportunities that are there to reach an audience now, because there are ways to reach people that are way more cost effective than old school advertising. And if you invest in that, if you invest in really, really great content, you can multiply your time, because one piece of content, if it reaches, even if it reaches 50 people, that's 50 less copies that you necessarily have to have. So think about the multiplying effect of the content that you have and the long-term value of the brand and the investment in it, because the ROI it might not be today, but once you get the brand right, you've got that for a decade. People will still be asking me about the Beyond Billables podcast in 10 years time if I don't put another one out. And I think all businesses can think about that value. So long-term investment in brand, because brand is what drives value in the business. It what helps you get more customers, get more returning customers, charge more for the customers you have, and build long-term value. So if you can afford to be having a long-term view on that investment, make it in ways that you can build that underlying value of your business over time, and that will help attract the right people, the right client, if you get your positioning right and do all the strategic things that you need to do as well. It's not just about making stuff. It's about being very strategic about it, being very thoughtful, getting that positioning right, and making sure that brand message is on point, and it's on point in every touch point that you have with your client. And it sounds like a lot, but it should be what we aspire to as business owners. And it's what I do. I want every touch point of Beyond Billables to be having that stamp on it. And that's what every size business should aspire to, especially the C-suite, and it's achievable.
Yeah, nicely put. And Michael, for anyone who's like, God damn, I need to reach out to Michael, where are the channels they should reach out to you by?
Yeah, well, I'm everywhere, but look, LinkedIn, Michael Bromley on LinkedIn. Please connect to me there. At Beyond Billables on Instagram and Facebook. Please feel free to DM me, connect me with me, and the same with TikTok. Yeah, we're everywhere. And love the contact with people all around the world, and it's just it's great fun to have this discussion with you, mate, and I can't wait to roll with you hopefully next year when we're allowed to.
Yeah, 100%. I need to get back in the game. I haven't actually touched mats here in over, I dare say over 1.5 years. I haven't touched the mats at all. So I got to get back into it.
Dude,
you know, but
we saw the first week.
yeah, just get through the first week of just hard training, and then everything should just click, right? You know, so for anyone who's watching, listening, I'm a purple belt, so it's not like I'm a white belt where I don't know anything. I know a little bit of something, and so I'm able to kind of translate that coming through. But Michael, thank you so much for your time. It was so much fun talking to you. And for anyone who's watching and listening, I'll put all of his details in the show notes below. And until then, I'll see you on the next show.